Hey guys, welcome back to week 4 of my big fat mouth. It's not about Mike and it's not about me. So this week we're moving back into speaking about words, and in specific we're talking about the influence of our words, right?
Yeah. So I want to read a verse and then I want to share just a couple of things about this verse. Colossians chapter 4 verse 6 says, "Let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone."
Seasoned with salt, I like that.
Salt, I love salt. My cholesterol's bad, but I love salt. The image that I get in this is of my youngest, Riley, who's 10. And it was a little while ago, we were coming home, and I think she's got a word amount that she feels like she needs to speak into the world.
That needs to be out by the end of the day.
And so, man, every day when we pick her up from school, it's, hey, what'd you do today? Oh, in first period I did this, and in second period I did this, and oh, let me back up, because this happened when I met my friend. And so it's just this constant dialogue, right? Yeah. And my son has picked up on my social cues, because when Riley talks, I'll go, oh, that's great. Oh, that's fantastic. And now Gav does the same thing. And so not too long ago, we were coming home and Riley is sharing about her day. And it was just this detailed thing.
Right.
So I was able to pass the baton off to Gav at some point. I'm not sure what I did in that moment, but I was able to pass the baton off to, like, you're now talking to Gavin, Riley. Right. So Gavin's doing the, that's great. Oh, wow. Right? You know, and very much surfacey. We get out of the car, we walk into the house, I unarm the house, unlock everything, right? And I still hear Riley telling her story. And Gavin's doing, oh, really? That's nice. How great, right? And so I go into my room and I remove my shoes and put some stuff away. And then I hear a door close, but Riley's still talking. And so I thought that was kind of unique. I didn't really know what was happening. When I came around the corner, Riley's still telling her story to Gavin, who has closed his bedroom door, and she is like got her face in the crack of the door, and nothing fazed her. Like, she's still telling the story. And so I just laughed and laughed and laughed at that moment. And then she looked at me and she said, "Oh, you're out of your room." And so then she came towards me and started telling me. And it was just this constant conversation of what happened during her day. And I love her passion, and I love that she's needs to get this out, right? But there's a point in this scripture that Riley emphasizes that there's conversation happening all the time. And I think there are some things that we want to emphasize in conversation. There are beliefs, there are points, there are things we feel like we need to communicate. I really think there's 3 of them. The first is love. We want to communicate love in conversation. We want people to know that they're loved. The second is direction. We want to help people take whatever next step they need to take. The third is encouragement. Encouragement is so important, and we've been talking about that the last 3 weeks. We've talked about how important it is to build one another up. And what I found, though, is that often we can allow our conversation to be more of a monologue rather than a dialogue, right? Because we're in this social media world, we put a post out there, we're longing for people to respond to it, we're longing for people to like that comment or love that comment or share that comment. But in reality, it's just a monologue. And what I've learned is that a monologue is when you want to tell someone something. But a dialogue to people is when you want to share something. I want you to know that you're loved. I want to share this love with you. I want you to know that you have a purpose, that there's a direction for you. I want to share this with you. I want you to know that you are encouraged and that there's this encouragement I want to give to you. I want to share it with you. And so Paul actually writes this letter called Colossians. And in verse 6, he says, always let your conversation, the first part, always let your conversation. The idea is that Paul is leaning us into, we want a dialogue. The world is not a monologue world. We want a dialogue. And our words are powerful when they're in monologue. They're powerful. We've learned that last 3 weeks, right? We've learned how powerful words are. But our words are influential and make a difference when there's a dialogue, right? And so the invitation to start is that we would be people that would move from being in monologue conversations to dialogue conversations.
That's really good, Mike. So let's take a moment in our groups and we'll actually talk about these two different ways of speaking words, right? So one is monologue. It's a one-way thing. Then there is a dialogue. This is a two-way conversation that's happening. Let's talk about which one we are most and what are the effects of these ways of communicating. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying your conversations in your group. Mike, as I was thinking about the question, I'm realizing in the art world, collaboration is key, right? So for me, a big part of the way that I communicate is through the dialogue, right? I have to have this like constant interaction with people to formalize a final idea.
Gotcha. In my world and what I get to do, it's more monologue, right? I mean, what I'm doing right now is a little bit more monologue. What I do on a Sunday morning is a little bit more monologue.
Right.
But I really believe like the goal of it is to cause dialogue. And I have the privilege of meeting with people, the privilege of being in a connection group and being able to dialogue with people. Sometimes my wife needs to put her hand on my knee and say, shh, right? Like other people can talk too, you know? And so that's the thing I always have to catch myself on. So, but back to this verse. So let me just read it one more time. Let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Now, the first part we talked about conversation. So the conversation leads to, it's a conversation that is full of grace.
Dialogue around grace, right?
Absolutely. So grace in the Greek is actually a word that can be translated as a gift. And it's a gift that's not deserved. It's a gift that's not earned. It's a gift that's really almost surprising. So when I think about giving a gift, for me, I'm horrible at keeping secrets when it comes to gift giving. And just recently, my wife celebrated her birthday, and I wanted to get her something that would just surprise her. And so, because I'm the best husband in the world, and she will affirm that, or at least she better, because I'm the best husband in the world, I got her a scheduled appointment to get a tattoo. Oh, nice. And that was unique because I've always given her a hard time about tattoos. I was raised in a very conservative household, Baptist household, and so I would always like point back to like verses where I would tell her, hey, if you want to be a sinner, go ahead and get a tattoo, right?
That's right here.
Yeah, and even my kids now will argue like, Dad, that's not what it says. And I'm like, look it up. Look it up. Who has the degree, the Bible degree, right? You know. So I'm working on my arrogance and my ego. But when I gave her that gift certificate, she opened it up and she was speechless. And the only thing that she could get out was, "Is this what I think it is?" And she was shook, like she was. It was shock and awe for her, right?
Yeah.
And just so surprised. And so when we talk about grace, that's literally what grace does. It's a gift that makes you go, really? This is for me? You're giving this to me? It was Paul that says that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So he's writing this in light of what he's already written about what Christ does for us. And he says, let your conversation be full of gifts. Let your conversation be full of grace. And so think about when someone's rude, you give them a gift of love in a conversation. When someone's disrespectful, you give them the gift of respect. When someone's gossiping about you, you give them the gift of protecting their reputation. When someone's tearing you down, you give them the gift of building them up. This is literally what he's saying here. Now, easier said than done, right? But the idea is that what they're doing to you, you will not do to them, but instead, you will give them a good gift, a gift that they don't deserve, a gift that they didn't earn, and a gift that is surprising to them.
Mike, thank you for sharing. This is really good insight that Paul has to the people in Colossae, right? Why don't we pause here? We're going to go into our groups, and we're going to talk about how these words, these grace-given words, or these moments that have surprised us in our lives where people
shook. We felt shook.
Yeah, we felt shook, right? How this has influenced our lives. So let's talk about that now. All right, guys, hope you're enjoying the conversations in your group. One of the values that we have at Active is that you have great influence. And so let's go a little bit deeper into these scriptures and into the thoughts of what Paul's saying.
Yeah, let me read the verse one more time. Colossians 4:6. Let your conversation always be full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. So the season with salt portion is, I really want us to focus on it because it influences the very next thing, so that you may know how to answer everyone.
It's very practical, right? It's
Absolutely.
Like we interact with salt all the time. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like to eat and I like to flavor my food, right?
Have you had Doritos, dude?
Doritos are good. I need something to drink afterwards, right? I don't know what that has to do with this, but I'm going to keep going.
Here we go.
All right, here we go. The idea in this portion is being seasoned with salt. Like, one of my favorite TV shows is Seinfeld. And my favorite character on the show is Kramer.
Dude.
And Kramer's great because Kramer just finds himself in situations that he shouldn't be in, surprised situations. There's a moment where he is actually in a business organization and he just kind of fell into it. And then he's giving this pretend presentation. And at the end of it, he's walking out of the business room and somebody says, "Hey, great job today, K-Man." And then the line is so great. He says, "You don't sell the steak, you sell the sizzle." But the idea...
Wisdom from Kramer,
right? But I really think that that's what Paul is saying here, is that when our conversations are seasoned with salt, listen, as followers of Jesus, we have Jesus as our Lord and Savior. He has us as his son or his daughter. Like, we have the steak, so to speak, right? The problem often is that we don't sell the sizzle of Jesus.
Right.
A friend of mine said years ago when I first got into ministry, he was writing a book, and one of the chapters was like all the dead Bible people. He was kind of being folksy and jokey, right? And he said one of the chapters was going to be on all the dead Bible people. And he realized, well, they're not dead. Like, these people lived lives, powerful lives. And so he changed the chapter to who killed all the Bible people? Because the idea is that we teach these stories and talk about these stories and live these stories, and we forgot that it brings life. There's not life in us. The joke always is like, if you have Jesus in your heart, tell your face, right? Like, you should have joy. You should be smiling. And so what Paul is saying here is, you have something. You have a steak. You got to sell the sizzle of the steak. And the point that he's leaning into is something that Jesus did. Jesus had all this great information about himself and about what his kingdom is going to do, and it was going to change lives. But Jesus didn't start with information. Jesus started with emotion. He started with the sense that we want something, we need something. And for us, when we're hungry, the emotion is, I gotta get some food. I'm gonna get angry. Right? We don't start thinking about what sort of food. We start with Doritos, right? Like, I'm just gonna eat some Doritos. I'm just gonna grab it and go. The idea that Jesus is wanting us to understand, that Paul is wanting us to understand, is start with the sizzle. Help people understand that this information about Jesus brings life. We see this in the life of Jesus in Luke chapter 15, actually. Story of the prodigal son, many of you probably are aware of it. The story of the lost coin, the story of the lost sheep. The emotional words that he uses is the word lost. Something's been lost, and we all know what it's like. We all have that moment where we're like, where's my keys?
There's a feeling that we get, right?
Right. And I got to find it. I got to do something about it. And so as he's telling this story, everybody there is leaning in. And the unique thing is, there's religious leaders there. There's marginal people there. They're not necessarily religious. They're not necessarily bad. And then there's tax collectors and sinners, right? And so there's a huge group of people there. And if he started with information, the religious leaders might understand. If he started with information about being broken, the tax collectors and sinners might understand. If he started with finding purpose, the marginal group might understand. But Jesus starts with the emotion of losing something. And he's actually answering the question, what is God like? What does God want? What does God do? And so he starts with, well, what do you do? And the whole point of the Luke chapter 15 is drawing people into the information about God, but he starts with the emotion, because the information is what's life-changing. The person, the work, and the power of Jesus Christ on the cross through the resurrection. That's what he's pointing them to. That's what he wants him and her to know in that conversation. And so having your conversation be seasoned with salt is a conversation that is emotionally charged, but emotionally charged in the direction of good information, that Jesus is doing something, that Jesus is going to accomplish something. And as followers of Jesus, especially for those of you that are Christians in this group, you need to know that your words have influence to help people move from here to there. That our words, when it's seasoned with salt, are words that engage, are words that involve, and are words that challenge. And so as we flavor each other, because that's what salt does, right? As we flavor each other, here's some phrases that I would encourage you to think about as you use words. Use words that matter. Don't use words that don't matter. And you might ask the question, well, what words matter? What words don't matter?
Right.
You make that decision, right? You make that decision. I know what words matter and what words don't matter. Use words that matter. Use words that ignite, that start a fire or a riot in people's hearts, that lead them to Jesus, that help them to understand Jesus. Use words that rally. Rallying words are always really important. Like, come on, you can do this, right? Even in moments where we're really down, there's something about like, hey, everything's going to be okay. I'm here, I'm with you, right? Use words that convict and not condemn. There's a difference. And here's the thing. We know the difference between conviction and condemning.
Right.
Conviction is, right? I'm going to point these fingers at you. Actually, that's condemning. Conviction is I'm going to invite you, right? Condemning is I'm going to wave the finger at you. And then the last thing, use words that challenge people to live in love. Use words that challenge people to step into this. Why? Because the end of the conversation that Paul is talking about in Colossians 4, verse 6, is that we may know how to answer everyone.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much for sharing. We'll take a moment to talk in our groups next and just share a bit more about how it is that these words have the power in our lives to influence and how it is that we have shared our faith maybe in the last couple of weeks or in the last couple of months, right? Like what's our experience been with sharing these words and with sharing our faith with people?
Yeah, when was the last time you shared your faith? I think would be a really important question for you to talk about because we want it to be recent, right? We want it to be just from last week and I've talked to this person. That's really important if we have these powerful words. Before we do that, we just want to thank you for being a part of Connection Group. We believe that you are worth knowing. So thank you for progressing together. Thank you for being a part of this group. We want to challenge you with two things. One, we're going to relaunch groups at the beginning of 2019. And so you're going to be able to take the holidays off, take a break from one another. I would encourage you as a group to hang out together, maybe have a meal together during that season. But also, I know that there's somebody in these groups, I can see him, you sitting right there.
That one.
Yep, you're looking at me. I know there's somebody in this group that's ready to host. And we want to encourage you to begin to consider what it would look like to host a group. And one of the best ways to get started is to message us either on social media or you can email us at info@activechurches.com. We want to begin to have a conversation with you about what it means to host a group. Obviously, you know that it's pretty fun, it's pretty simple, and it creates a space for people to grow in relationship with each other and to grow in relationship with God. And so consider that. And again, the final question before we close our time together is, when was the last time you shared your faith? And who was it that you shared your faith with? And how did that go? And then sign up for group, and we're going to relaunch at the beginning of 2019. God bless you guys. Thanks for being a part of Connection Group.